Hi, I'm seeing people still coming in. Thank you so much for being here. If you can share in the chat your name, your affiliation, and something that you will not miss or are not missing about life before COVID. And I'm actually going to turn it over to my colleague, James, to get us started. Thank you so much for sharing in the chat.
All right, thank you so much. Hey everyone, good afternoon. My name is James Chanderick, and I work as an ESL teacher for Center City Public Charter Schools. I'm also the Ward 4 Fellow for EmpowerEd. We are living and teaching under a global pandemic. Currently, pretty much all of our schools are taught virtually, with a couple exceptions for our students with disabilities. Now, due to this pandemic, it has made our lives as teachers really a lot more difficult, including several unique challenges now that DC teachers face. Some of these challenges include, you see on the screen right here. So we have some of the highest teacher turnover rates. So we had teachers fill out a survey during this week, and 50% were considering leaving their job. Our Black and Brown teachers face even more pressure on job due to systemic racism and classism, as well as increased COVID-19 cases and deaths for our Black and Brown people. There's been a lack of major technology and bandwidth, while there's a high amount of screen time for our kids. Next slide, Scott. There has been a major lack of planning time, and oftentimes teachers are often told about major announcements last minutes. COVID-19 has further increased inequity between our Black and Brown families, as well as more pressure for our teacher parents, so our teachers that are also parents. There's been a lack of a third option of teaching outside, and it's especially the case for our Ward 7 and our Ward 8. Next slide, Scott. Impact is still in complete use right now, bringing a lot of pressure to our teachers to do their job while under a global pandemic. Charter schools are often out of these major conversations, but still about half of our kids go to charter schools in DC. And of course, with the mayor's announcement of reopening schools, has caused some mass confusion for how teachers, principals, and elected officials on how schools will reopen. So, and what you're going to hear in our briefing today is several of our passionate, engaging teachers go into more in depth about these issues, as well as finding concrete solutions to bring about these issues that we're facing today. And now I bring it over to Ben and Nicole.
Thank you, James. My name is Ben Williams. I teach 12th grade U.S. government at Capital City Public Charter School. And as James said, teacher turnover and keeping good teachers in the classroom is a huge priority right now. So just to remind everyone, a lot of people through the DC State Board and through other citywide data, DC had one of the highest teacher turnover rates in the country prior to the pandemic. And one of the reasons we know about that was workload. So transition to the current pandemic, and teachers are feeling even more overwhelmed right now due to unrealistic work expectations and demands. And that's one thing we really want to focus on, about creating reasonable expectations so we can do our job well, but also account for adjustments during the pandemic. So in short, we're refashioning our entire jobs to be able to teach online right now, and we need to be able to deal with this now in real time and stop the bleeding to keep good teachers in the classroom. So according to a recent EmpowerEd survey after the mayor's announcement, 37% or only 37% of DCPS elementary school teachers said they're not considering leaving the classroom. So that's that number at the bottom right there, which essentially leaves 63% of people really thinking about whether or not they can stay in their current job right now. That is an alarming number and something we really need to attend to immediately. Next slide, please. Thanks, Scott. So to kind of zoom out and see the whole picture here, this is a chart pre-summer, including all teachers. And if you look at the two numbers at the top of the screen, essentially 27% of teachers are plan to stay, and only 22% of teachers say they're not considering leaving. That means more than 50% of teachers in the city overall are considering changing jobs. We already have a high turnover rate, so we have, in the back of people's minds, more than half of people considering leaving the classroom. That's going to have a really devastating impact on students if we don't attend to that immediately. I'll turn over to Nicole for some solutions.
Hi, good evening, everyone. First, we propose that we need better data to solve this problem. The State Board of Ed legislation is a great exit survey, really so we can clearly gather data from both sectors, both public and charter schools. As well, teachers need and perform better when administrators and policymakers trust teachers and give the gift of time. So that means more time to plan, grade, and understand new technology to better support our students.
Now we'll turn it over to Andrea Flood. Andrea, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon and listening to us. I'll be talking to you today about the impact on educators of color in DCPS. As we know, educators of color are dying disproportionately in our city. 86% of DC resident COVID deaths have been in Ward 7, Ward 8, Ward 4, and Ward 5. And we know those are the concentrated areas of Hispanic and Black Americans. Our women outpace men in every group in age range from 15 years old to 35 is where they start to come together in those numbers. And it's really concerning. People of color are at a high risk of contracting the virus and taking it home and spreading it to our families. It's important for us to remember that educators of color are stressed because 63% of the educators in DCPS are of color. 80% of the students in DCPS are of color. 26% of those students receive SPED, and 47% are at risk for housing and food benefits. The educators of color are facing a triple load: COVID-19, racial tensions, and we need a plan to return to school that will allow us to feel protected and heard. With your support, we can start looking at things that will allow us to dig into those issues, such as identifying teachers who can help support the overwhelming response that we receive from parents and each other about how this plan that just came out from the mayor is affecting us negatively. We need your help. Next slide, Ben. What can you do for us? Can you please meet with distance learning experts so that you can relieve the stress and tension from the overworked teachers? Use teacher input and scheduling expectations. Meet with building construction professionals and health officials to make a safe plan so that we can return to our jobs that we love, supporting the communities, and be safe while we're doing it. Ensure that every DCPS school with an open door to students and teachers is safe. Do they have daily COVID testing? Are there window units? Is there plexiglass in the classrooms? Are there HEPA filters? Are there desk dividers? Can the students go to the bathroom in a small group and go through hallways and through entrances and exits safely? And then we're asking you, as people who are working and providing care, can you please make sure that we have wellness space to allow us to better serve our students and ourselves? Thank you.
Hello, good evening. Thank you all for coming. I'm Katrina Delaney, the Family Equity Team Lead, as well as a teacher at Two Rivers Public Charter School. As you know, COVID-19 has exacerbated some of the pre-existing financial instabilities present for many DC families. While some families in DC are able to afford childcare, private teachers, tutors, babysitters, etc., many families in DC are not able to do so. This is further widening the educational opportunity gap in DC. Many teachers and essential workers in DC don't make enough money to hire childcare support for their own children and are forced to choose between their job or supporting their child's education. Next slide. We are asking the DC government to allocate funds for families with a combined income of under $125,000 per year to receive financial assistance to cover the cost of childcare and educational support, a childcare and educational support credit, if you will. We are specifically asking for $1,000 per month to be provided to families for every child under 11 and targeted at those who are least well served by virtual learning and who cannot manage their learning without adult or parental help. Preference would be given to teachers and essential workers. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Ruth Scott. I am a teacher at Two Rivers Public Charter, and I am here to talk about digital equity. Digital equity in the city is proving to be a very wide-spanning problem, and we wanted to kind of highlight priorities based on parent feedback and teacher feedback and experiences in the classroom since March. Our first concern is that internet connectivity has not been consistent for teachers or students, and that this is causing disruptions to virtual learning. A second concern is that there is excessive screen time, either devoted to online content and virtual learning, but also because of tech issues and learning to navigate new platforms. But it is, in the end, limiting student learning. So our solutions, the first is that we'd like to see policymakers working with landlords and other agencies in the city so that everyone can access internet providers equally. We are also looking to see if hotspots can be provided on a one-to-one basis. Currently, they have been given to households, but we are finding they do not provide enough connectivity if there are multiple devices running at the same time. The other thing we'd like to see is that screen hours are being limited by providing more offline learning activities, and that we edit and plan our curriculum so that we are prioritizing quality over quantity for our students and focusing on opportunities for non-academic social emotional learning.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Colin Rexford. I'm one of the COVID response co-chairs, and I'm speaking to you regarding outdoor learning. It's a model of teaching that has becoming more popular, and excuse me, especially in recent months given the pandemic. And as teachers, we're looking for ways to enhance our learning given our virtual state. And in this case, we're looking into a history to kind of see what has been done in the past. Outdoor learning is not a new idea. It was used as a response to the pandemic in 1918 as a way to ensure in-house learning. But it's getting attention right now, as many of us know, that it's safer to be outdoors. And while it's not the only, it's only supposed to be a piece of the puzzle, just in regards to thinking of reopening as a possibility to have schools reopen safely. We have been prioritizing early childhood students for outdoor learning as they have the greatest need, as their skills are foundational and they need that in-person time, in addition to the fact that they need the most care. Currently, as far as given the announcement as far as reopening by the mayor this week, a lot of teachers are concerned about school buildings being safe, as in little or no information regarding air quality or HVAC systems in school buildings, and lack of accountability if schools will be outfitted with necessary equipment to reopen. Solution that we're proposing is a fund for outdoor learning infrastructure. DC has invested over about $4 million in outdoor dining. So if the district is able to do that, as far as us going out to restaurants, they should be able to make some type of investment in schools as far as making outdoor learning opportunities possible. The other proposal is investment in winterizing outdoor learning opportunities. While obviously different schools may have different feelings towards having their students be outside, we are proposing for schools that want to explore that option, given if they have the space, that money can be allocated towards those schools that would be able to do so. That being said, we're also wanting to make an investment in prioritizing schools and areas east of the Anacostia, as safety has become an issue in these areas, and having a winterized outdoor learning option could be a solution to many families in that area who are concerned about safety, but also may not have the space necessarily where students are able to play safely.
Hi, everybody. My name is Maya. I am one of the Equity and Justice co-chairs, and I'm also a grade teacher at Thompson Elementary in downtown DC. So as my colleagues and peers have been sharing, we are in a crazy and time period where teachers right now are being asked to kind of reimagine teaching and relearn how to teach, how use all new platforms, all new technology, things that have never been done before, things that have never been asked by teachers before, and the way you're used to teaching where we can, you know, control the space and be close to our students and control the environment is now out of our hands, right? We can't control what's happening in students' homes. We can't control what their internet connection is like. We can't control if all of a sudden, you know, the water spills and everything's a mess. Mom is yelling in the back and little sister is crying, or someone's running around without any clothes on, and distractions galore. And all of this is affecting our students' ability to focus, our students' ability to learn, and us as teachers, our ability to teach. And so given this context, we need to rethink what it means to be evaluating teachers while we are in a crisis. Next slide, please. So some things that we are proposing is to suspend teacher evaluations while this crisis persists. It seems unfair and unreasonable to be evaluating teachers while a system of teaching and learning is being developed as we are being asked to do it. And instead to really focus on both and support. Having teachers work to develop what are the best practices in this new environment and to share that with one another through professional development opportunities. So instead of coming to be evaluated, coming together to learn and grow as teachers as we figure out and navigate this new landscape we're all in.
Jamal.
All right. Hello, everybody. Trying to get the tech stuff working. So I am not Rochelle Chapman. I am Jamal Jones. I am also with EmpowerEd, and I will be leading the portion relating to union. So I didn't write this part, so I'm going to do the best I can. But one of the biggest things I will definitely say as a charter teacher, and I've only taught in charter schools, that this has kind of been an interesting time in terms of like the COVID-19 crisis. I will say first and foremost that every response, every note I see relating education doesn't actually explicitly talk about charter schools. It's always through DCPS. DCPS will have this plan. DCPS will do this with students. DCPS will do this. But with charter schools, it's not really our voices involved in the conversation at all. It's not really a plan for like, this is what the DC charter school system will do. This is what we expect, or so on and so forth. And like I said, as a person who's only taught in charter schools, it's definitely more of a Wild West. We'll do our own thing, you do yours, and we'll all figure it out. So there hasn't been a lot of charter voice in general regarding this conversation, and there definitely hasn't been a lot of just kind of like concern about what our focus is, may be, or what our concerns may be. So we can go ahead to the next slide, because I can't really speak much. But yeah, the only thing we could really request is that there is teachers, specifically charter school teachers, that are allowed to actually be involved with these conversations when we're talking about our issues with a teaching crisis. And one thing that we would also request is a document outlining DC teachers, and let's see, I would say a guideline. Yeah, guidelines for returning to in-person teaching, which prioritizes teachers, students, families' health, and safety, if you don't mind. So we're working on a team to put that together.
Thank you. Turn it over to Greta.
Hi, my name is Greta Etherton. I teach ESL at Garrison Elementary School. When we heard the news about the reopening plans on Monday, many of us were feeling incredibly frustrated that the plans were made and announced without teacher input and without data about how many teachers are physically available to go to work in person right now during the pandemic. We were also feeling incredibly undermined that teachers, administration, and parents all heard this news for the first time at the same time on Monday. We're also feeling afraid that our lives and the lives of our school families will be put at unnecessary risk due to reopening just before the holidays.
Is this me? All right, well, my name is Liz Koenig. I'm a DCPS teacher and I'm a DCPS parent, and I'm here to be the primal screen because I'm angry. I'm angry that DCPS had a chance to get this right and has again gotten it wrong. There is no one way to reopen our schools in the right way, but it seems like DCPS is picking from a menu of wrong options, and that's because the process matters. If one resounding drumbeat you've heard through the spring and the summer is that families and teachers want to be included in these discussions and we have continually been shut out. I'm angry that my parents are coming to me and I don't have answers for them. I'm angry that my principal found out the same time I did and doesn't have time to do the meetings she was going to do with teachers this week because she's now scrambling to answer family questions and get ready for this November 9th plan, which is not a plan because it engenders hundreds of unanswered questions. That is not a plan, it is a concept. We're a solutions-oriented group, so here are the solutions that I think should happen. And I think we need an apology. As a parent and as a teacher, I would love an apology from DCPS for the way that this plan was put forward and for saying that family and educator voice matter. But not putting out any comprehensive surveys that really seek to understand. It's one thing to hear us, it's another thing to understand us. When we ask for more in-person education options for little ones, that may not mean sitting 5 days a week on a computer with somebody watching you in a room. That may mean 2 days a week outdoor learning. So you can hear what we're saying, but if you don't understand where we're coming from, you're gonna come up with a plan that is not gonna fit for a lot of families. The second thing I would say is work with the WTU. Sign the WTU checklist, work with the WTU. If teachers are not invested in this, and if you don't invest in us, the plan falls apart. You need teacher buy-in, work with the WTU. And my third thing is slow down. You've heard from so many teachers tonight that this is hurting our mental health. This new plan will put extra teaching hours on virtual teachers. It will put extra kids in their class. It is increasing their workload. When all these teachers are saying, slow down, this is too much, you're making my career at risk, you're making our children's mental health at risk, this is too much. Slow down, pull back, apologize, and work with us.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to go quickly over a survey that we put out to DCPS elementary teachers following this announcement. And one of those, and we heard from over 120, it's probably a lot more than that now, and counting DCPS elementary teachers who have responded quickly. And there were a few things that stood out, some of which you already heard from the other presenters. One is that 29% said they might quit because of this announcement specifically. That's obviously a very alarming number in a city where we already have very high teacher turnover. And the total number who are considering leaving the profession at 50% for some combination of the reopening announcement, the mental health stress on virtual learning and other factors. 54% told us they have an underlying health condition or a close family member who does, which is very similar to what the WTU survey found of teachers at large. Only 9% felt comfortable returning under this plan. And we had 100 questions submitted there. Just to highlight a few of them, they talked about the health protocols needed, talking specifically about teacher rights. Will teachers have to use sick leave if they get COVID or have COVID-like symptoms? Why are we changing groups? A lot of very strong concern about teachers having formed these relationships with their students over the initial weeks of the year, only to now have to change up groups potentially with this new model. Not having a school nurse in every school, and a lack of understanding of why that has not been prioritized, why there hasn't been teacher engagement or an MOU signed with the WTU. How does this work for content teachers, which seems to be a huge oversight in the plan, that if you're a second or third grade teacher, for example, and you teach English or you only teach math, you can't simply have one teacher for all of the grade level as the plan calls for, because that person is only certified to teach one content area or another. So we would have uncertified teachers with those students, or they'd be asked to teach in another language, for example, in a dual language school, or another content they are not certified for. What are we going to do for students with IEPs, and so many more? And we had over 100 submissions of specific solutions they would like to take up. So I'm going to move us kind of into our conversation mode here. You heard from a lot of teachers there about a whole host of ideas, from childcare to evaluation, to outdoor learning and digital equity, improving virtual learning. And so I want to move into a question and answer session now. And so if you are able to, we'd like to turn on cameras and go into a conversation mode, following up on any of these specific ideas. And just point out there were a host of ideas that were in the kind of legislative policy bucket, which were a proposal for childcare and family equity credits, for example, that would go to families with young kids during the pandemic who need childcare assistance, and passing SBOE legislation on transparency and things that fit into the legislative bucket. And then there's a lot that was specific to policy, right? Since this announcement happened just Monday, and not knowing that that was going to happen before we hosted this, we added on a little bit there at the end in reaction to that from our elementary school teachers, but would love to take your questions for that. So what I'll ask is if folks could put any questions they have about the presentations or anything not covered in the chat, and then I will begin to direct those to some of the teachers I think that could best answer each of your questions. So I'll give folks just a second to start putting questions in the chat. And teachers were remarkably good at sticking to time. So we have a full 30 minutes left for questions here.
Hey, Scott, can I just say something for 1 second?
Yes, go for it.
I am sharing the sentiments with Liz. I am just very angry today and this week. Angry with the announcement that happened Monday, and then also angered by the firing of the School Without Walls principal today. And so, you know, I wanted everyone to know I'm coming to this space. I don't know how to apologize further on behalf of the lack of leadership in education in the city right now. And, you know, I think, you know, a really big piece of this is going to have to be changing the leadership, changing mayoral control over education, and getting some real oversight and accountability. It has just been a very disappointing day, and I don't know what message it sends to principals and students and teachers when you do stick up for your teachers and your students, you are let go.
I appreciate that message, and I know that it's just deeply frustrating, right, for so many of our school communities to see this, you know, continue to happen when people speak up. And so we're here for a couple of reasons. People are passionate about these ideas and these solutions, but really focused on what this would be like if teachers did have a say, right? And what the school system would look like if some of these very direct teacher ideas that you've heard tonight were put into place and teachers were collaborated with. And so I'll open it up. If anybody has a question, you can feel free to go off mute and ask directly or post in the chat.
So today, I will just make a comment. You know, today we had parent-teacher conferences, and so we had an opportunity to really connect with lots of parents around like what's going on. They're asking us questions, and one of their sort of big questions is around the quality of education their child will receive if you know, teachers being split between trying to figure out how to teach in this sort of hybrid space, right? And so I do want to kind of push on just leaders to continue that conversation around, like, you know, what does it look like in order, if we want to have a quality education for kids, what is reasonable in terms of the expectations for teachers that are now going to have to balance both spaces? And then just even hearing from parents, like, we are so connected to our stakeholders. We talk to our parents daily. If anyone knows what they're going through and what they need, it's us. And so the fact that we're not at the table to make these decisions is even more alarming, in that, like, we are the ones fielding all of these questions. We are the ones teaching in these spaces with these parents who are struggling to try to figure out ways to make it work, but they're collaborating and they're working with us. And lastly, I'll say my school, I'm a Garrison teacher. I know we have a Garrison parent in the house, and lots of Garrison teachers. You know, we conducted empathy interviews for our families, and it was so awesome to see that they were like on board with what teachers wanted. And so I think that a lot of the pressure may have come from sort of like the pre-K space, speaking from like a 4th, 5th grade teacher, I think it's important for us to delineate like where's the highest need, because a lot of them are like, my kids are independent, we can work it out, on the 4th and the 5th grade level, maybe even on the 3rd grade level. But like being really clear, when we say elementary school, we're including everyone in elementary. And like, is that really where the highest level of need is? And so if we are going to be, stretching teachers thin, and we're going to be, changing a system last minute, let's be thoughtful about the way that we do it.
Thank you. And we do have a question from Councilmember Silverman about saying, we agree that the rollout of term 2 was not done well, but trying to understand the concerns of teachers. Is it health related and that teachers do not feel safe in the classroom? What would make teachers in elementary school feel safe? What does DCPS need to do? So Greta, Brenda, Liz, Isa, Colin, all elementary school teachers here off the top of my head. Any of you want to take that? Maya, anyone who teaches elementary?
I can take it. Just off the top of my head, what they need to do first and foremost is reach out to teachers and stakeholders and put us at the table so that we can have a discussion about it and not be told by people who are not in our classrooms and not in our schools what we are going to do. The concerns are both health related for teachers and students and quality related. We're not convinced by this plan that we'll be able to do the quality of work that we hold ourselves to as educators in both the physical and virtual space. And so that needs a lot more planning and a lot more organizing. DC Public Schools needs to organize, they need to have an understanding of which teachers are available for in-person teaching. They got that data from their survey on Monday after they made their announcement. They need to know how many teachers they'll have available for in-person learning and how many teachers will have to be virtual due to underlying conditions. And would someone like to add?
I'll chime in. We need to know what will be for teacher break times. What other adult is going to be coming in when teachers have to take lunch or go to the bathroom? Like, how is that going to be covered? How does that work with a cohort system? And what are the symptoms that children need to be sent home for? What are the doctor's notes? Where is the granular detail of how exactly this is going to keep people safe? How are teachers supposed to deal with having a headache? How are teachers supposed to deal with a run-of-the-mill cold? I mean, it's just like the everyday things that I still have never seen addressed in the kind of detail that as a teacher we all want to know going back in so that we can plan for our and our families' safety.
I just dropped into the chat. We've gotten over 100 questions from elementary school teachers so far on how the plan would work. So they're all in that document and labeled by category, as well as the top 10 most frequently recurring questions. And there's a section that we put in there on logistical questions, which I think is really helpful, which gets teachers asking the very specific questions. For example, if they can't attend and they need a sub, can a sub go into that space? Is that possible, given COVID precautions? And so it gets into a lot of those granular questions that certainly folks doing oversight could ask. I'll go to Maya Brennan's question. What do charter teachers need for representation and assurance right now? Do you need rules and guidance flowing through DCPS to your school's leadership? And so charter teachers, James, Ben, any other charter teachers on here? Liz Rosenberg, who want to respond?
I can answer briefly. I would say and echo a lot of the same things that Liz and Greta just mentioned. I think those are common concerns in the charter sector as well. A lot of the logistical challenge, we want to make sure that there's like ample health safeguards in place, and then also make sure that there's enough spaces. I think going from a place in which we're used to having 20 to 30 kids in a classroom, and then being in a world in which we're having to be 6 feet from everyone, it doesn't leave necessarily much assurance for how we will transition from the space we're in to the space we were in, and what that looks like. What will that mean for people's anxiety and mental health to be in such close proximity, and feeling like those things matter, feeling like mental health concerns are also appreciated and respected, and I think having a conversation about what's smart and sequential and scaffolded, reopening plans look like, rather than just feeling like there's an arbitrary decision date that hasn't been communicated why we are trying to go back.
And I just realized actually our team lead for our charter teacher group is here now. So Rochelle, I'll turn it over to you on that question.
Hey everyone, how are you? Sorry I'm late. I think that the biggest thing that needs to happen is that we need a seat at the table. So somebody else already said that, but like all of the other things will come after because our questions will be able to be answered, but we need to be a part of these conversations that are happening. That's really the bottom line. The talks around going back to school and going into the classroom are give me so much anxiety, thinking about family members and what could happen. And it's always the anxiety doesn't necessarily come from going back into the classroom, but it's just the fact that somebody else is making this decision for me. And that just doesn't seem like the right way to go about things. That seems really, really callous, unethical, and uncaring. We need to be a part of the conversation.
And I do want to like second like what everyone's saying too, is that, so I think often like, I mean, charter schools have their own way of doing things, but oftentimes they will follow what DCPS is doing. So to me, like my biggest worry is like if we have a plan DCPS like this where there is no communication and no follow through with teachers, it's going to be the same with charter school teachers as well. And so for charter teachers, like the problems that we're gonna have are gonna be the same for DCPS teachers as well. So again, like just having detailed, like well thought out plans. I think also I think also HVAC is a huge concern as well. Like some of these buildings are not in good shape even before COVID. Like I've worked in buildings where there are rats, there's mold, really unstable like conditions indoors. But then you want to be able to teach like in those buildings, like while there's a global pandemic outside, like that to me just gives me like so much anxiety. And like how safe do I feel as like a teacher and also as like a person? Like I don't want to get sick from COVID. Like I want to make sure that I'm same with my kids too. But like these buildings that for our schools are not in good shape already, and then even more not so in shape because of the global pandemic as well.
And Andrea, I know, wanted to speak briefly to self-contained classes. Are you there, Andrea?
Yes, hello everyone. Again, Andrea Flood here. I am a self-contained teacher at HD Cook this year. And I took that job because I wanted to serve the students who are underserved and underrepresented. When I think about going into the classroom with students who are struggling to do a lot of things for themselves, including toileting, pulling up their pants, wiping their own nose, and thinking that they have to ride the school bus to get to school, and then going home to take care or provide support to my 90-year-old grandmother, it makes me very sad. I think about the parents who have to make that decision for their children, that they enjoy seeing their kids learn and being in a safe space and have done everything that they can and that we've asked them to do to get their kids on the computer, get them signed in, giving them time to just feel like normal kids, and then putting that stress on them of having to figure out how to maneuver their children through a pandemic. Many of them are on public transportation. If they are not in the communities where their schools are, a lot of the self-contained classrooms are away from where those kids live. And we have to keep those things in mind. These are the same students who, when we transferred to Canvas, there was no concern about putting multi-grade classrooms on one Canvas page. It wasn't until last week that I even got access to Canvas for all of my students. So how can we even think about sending those, the most vulnerable, the medically fragile students, back to school first as the guinea pigs? It breaks my heart. And we have to think about everything when we put this plan, because in schools with 300 plus students and 100 plus staff members, we have to make sure that we are doing the right thing for everyone involved, and especially the students who need the most and have the least.
Thanks, Andrea. I appreciate your passion on that. And this is just one more of those things where we got so many questions from teachers about how we're going to serve our students with disabilities and logistical questions about how that could work. And we heard from DCPS that these are students who would be prioritized for a return in person, but it also is incredibly complex, right, to make that work well. And it's exactly why it's important to ask teachers these questions, because you get that granular level logistical questions that can help you in planning. I'm gonna see if there's any other questions in the chat. If not, so Mary Levy observing, in addition to giving teachers and principals and parents a seat at the table, everyone needs better information. Council doing more oversight, forcing answers to questions, reinstating FOIA. And Rochelle talking about surveys, using feedback. One thing I wanted to, certainly feel free to continue to post questions about reopening. I did want to make sure we're able to go to some of the other topics presented and allow some feedback. And so Katrina presented a little bit earlier on our a topic of childcare and education credits that families, low-income families would receive a $1,000 a month, essentially guaranteed income or tax credit for children in elementary school who do not have safe in-person learning options. I wanted to see if any of the policymakers, leaders, candidates on here wanted to chip in on that childcare conversation.
Thanks, Scott.
No pressure, just giving some time, and we'll go to the next questions. Great. Well, we're going to put out very specifically what that proposal looks like, and would love to get feedback, especially from council members and staff as we move forward with that. From Janice Lewis George, we have a question about any feedback from teachers and parents on outdoor learning. So does anybody want to take some time to expand on those ideas?
I can speak to that actually a little more. So actually, funny enough, my school, we were actually planning to have outdoor learning play groups, enrichment opportunities for our pre-K students at my school actually starting next week. And due to the announcement, we may not be able to do it. But at least we're actually going to send out a survey tonight to see if families would be still interested, given that my colleague has to maybe adjust her schedule because she has 2 kids and she has to figure out how she's going to work everything now in light of the reopening in term 2. But a lot of my families have actually been begging to have another option, especially for my families who are early language learners who need that extra support, who cannot, and who need that in-house instruction and would benefit, especially since they're little, would benefit from having more opportunities where they're able to socialize safely, of course, but giving them the opportunity just to be together in a way that they're not able to right now. So at least at my school, it has been, at least among the parents that I work with, they have been really excited for the idea that we're able to offer that to them, especially knowing that we're essentially volunteering to do it. We weren't forced to do it, but some of my colleagues were open to doing it because we realized that there is a need there's just so much that you can do virtually with young children. But now, especially with this announcement, we may be able to only offer something for 3 weeks. And then depending on what happens, having to switch up different groups, which even my colleague was like, I don't want to switch different groups, especially since, I'm just getting to know my students, and I am the same way. So I think at least for me, and at least the areas that I'm working in, it's very positive. I think as families are excited, as presents another option. And I feel, and I want that option to be available to students across the city, where especially that they may not have the space. We need to be talking about opportunities where we're able to kind of invest in those spaces for students so that they have safe spaces to learn, but at the same time that they also have spaces to play as well.
And Colin, I wanted to add on to that a couple of things. One is, as some people have been following, know we have outdoor learning happening at a number of schools already across DC. Brea Public Charter School is doing it at multiple campuses now. I just got a text message from someone of dropping off a lot of logs at their campuses for their students' outdoor learning site. They're doing it there. A couple other charter schools are setting it up to do it now. And then a lot of private schools have been doing it. So we do have knowledge now from months of practice here and elsewhere how it works. But I wanted to talk about Colin's point quickly about volunteering, because a lot of the conversation has been, DCPS wants to return, the mayor wants to return, teachers don't want to return, right? And actually teachers have volunteered to do a lot of things where they do want to engage students in person and haven't been allowed to do that engagement, right? And I think that's an important point. So a lot of teachers have raised, so in the previous survey we did, which is a sample of 400 teachers, 33% of teachers in that survey said they would not teach indoors, but they would go back and teach outdoors. That's a large amount of teachers that are available to do that potentially if that was set up. In addition, one of the early ideas that our group put forward was outdoor enrichments, where a teacher could say, I'm a history teacher, I would love to give a DC history walking tour, right? And teachers could sign up to do learning experiences that were safe through a central system that DCPS could set up, like DCPS Outdoor Enrichment Program. And then teachers get paid to do those experiences. Students and families can sign up for them if they choose to. So it's all by choice. There's a contact tracing system in place and it's volunteer. And so there's a lot that teachers have stepped forward and been willing to do. And I think sometimes that gets overshadowed. And that's why, if you engage teachers and say, what are you willing to do? What would make you feel safe? There's actually a lot we could be providing families that we're not providing them right now.
Scott, can I add to that a little bit as well? I think that's an important part of the discussion as well, is this narrative has been created that teachers don't want to return. And I know even now a bunch of us have just said we don't feel safe returning buildings. But that as teachers, this virtual learning is very challenging for us as well. And this is not like our ideal by any way, shape, or form. And we do be back in the classroom. We do want to be with our students, but we are also the people who understand most what it requires to be in person and what safety risks exist because of that. And so if we want to do this safely, I just had a parent conference and I just keep thinking this mom said to me, where she said, my daughter is the most precious thing to me. And I think like that is the task that we are given every day as teachers, is parents trusting us with their most precious beings. And so how can we take this decision in a global pandemic lightly? And how are we not sitting through and figuring what is the safest ways? How are we making our buildings most safe? And unfortunately, given everything that's happened, the trust, at least in DCPS, between teachers and DCPS has been broken. And so even though I'm being told the HVAC system is being worked at my school, I don't trust them. Actually, after 23 years where we're all in coats and hats and gloves because the heat isn't working in our building, and people from Central keep coming and saying it's fixed and it's still 6 degrees every day, right? That trust is broken. And so there needs to be something done as well to regain that trust back so that we can feel like our lives and our professionalism is being respected and taken into account. So we do want, but we also don't want the lives of ourselves, the lives of our colleagues, the lives of our students and their families on our hands, right? We want this to be safe for us to continue, because our students are the most precious beings.
I can tell you as a DCPS teacher, I've been in those buildings where they say the work order is complete on the HVAC and it's still very cold or very hot in my room and hasn't. I think if we asked for a show of hands, we'd probably see most DCPS teachers have had that experience. And so the distrust, right, and mistrust on are what they're saying they're going to do actually happen. This is based in real experience, right, from our educators. Open up to any other questions. So we have a question here from Maya. I'm hearing mostly requests for regular and strong oversight for funds, for better listening from the chancellor. Emergency legislation, though, is the quickest thing council members can address right now. What is your top legislation, law change separate from the next supplemental budget that council members can push? If council members could pass some legislation right now by emergency, what would you want them to pass? Teachers, it's your opportunity.
For me, it would be the financial support for families to be able to seek help elsewhere for their needs. The families ultimately know what they need for their families, and if DCPS or if their charter LEA is not offering it, they need the resources to be able to get it somewhere else.
And Katrina can speak more to that proposal that she started to talk about before, but I also say that it is based on other states. They did research on other states that are doing this. So there are states providing a child care and education credit to all low-income families to equalize this great inequity with pods. Katrina, do you want to say anything else about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think one point that I believe Colin touched on earlier is, you know, teachers not necessarily having the support they need for their own children. And we're thinking about having teachers go back into the building and having their own children either back in the building or at home. Families need to have options, right? Especially teachers, but also essential workers. We're asking families to, you know, provide care for their children and also work at the same time and provide an income for their family. And in some cases, they just can't do that, especially if their kids need a lot of one-on-one support. You know, some families have grandma watching all the kids, and that's going to work, but only for so long. And so we need to provide assistance financially for families, most specifically for teachers and essential workers, because they're running out of options, and there's only but so much time that we have.
And I'll note specifically for our undocumented residents, they've gotten very little in financial assistance since this pandemic began. And so there was, and thank you to the council members who are here that fought for that, but there was very little in an overall assistance to undocumented immigrants, and in that community especially. Some of the things we've talked about where you're in a building where the landlord will not permit internet for all, right, to be brought into their building because of, they say they have an exclusive contract for internet, which we've heard repeatedly from tenants. So they're, in the undocumented community, obviously in many ways, there's that one-time payment that they've gotten, but a lot of our families have gotten one single payment, right, during this pandemic. And that money was gone months and months ago, right? And so if we're gonna talk about family equity, that's certainly an emergency measure. Any other comments on legislation that you would like to see?
I would like to see like supplemental funding for schools themselves. And I'm only saying that is because principals at schools, teachers at schools know they are on the ground and have an idea of what their families need. And right now, you know, we can understand that budgets are tight, but I think especially given this is an emergency situation, we need to kind of think bigger and kind of expand our thinking beyond how can we best educate our students given the pandemic. And unfortunately, that's going to cost money. But the reality is we know best what our families need. We know what our communities need. And I think schools have to be well equipped, especially if we're looking to give families options as far as if they want to be in a hybrid model, if they want to be in person or something in the middle. We have to meet parents where they're at. And I think one thing that and I think all of us could say that we're all kind of very disappointed in is that this virtual learning as this one size fits all method is not working for many of our students. And I think in order for us to avoid the idea of having to deal with the learning gaps that are going to happen within the next, God knows, within the next decade as a result of this pandemic, we need to think bigger and we need to give that money, the necessary funding to schools so that they can be able to provide for their communities a lot better rather than just doing everything as all one size fits all approach and students are still getting left out.
And I'll just pick in for one teacher who is not able to go off mute right now, but sent the message. Can the council push legislation with a veto-proof majority to not go back using this current plan until they go back to the table and negotiate with teachers and take a more comprehensive approach as something they would like to also see by emergency? I'm going to wrap up and share some links, but I thought there was one other person trying to jump in.
Yeah, I was just gonna say one of my biggest concerns, so being the Ward 8 fellow and having taught in Ward 7 and Ward 8 for a lot of years before I went to Garrison, I know that, you know, the majority of the population is African American, and we know that this is disproportionately affecting those people of color. And what I want to kind of echo what Colin said about supplemental funding, but being sure that we are thoughtful about being equitable in that funding, in supporting for families who are in Ward 7 and Ward 8, who like want things like desk in their home, who don't want to opt out, but their houses are not just like conducive for financial reasons for their kids to be able to like have a home office. And so I think about now being at Garrison, where the PTO is hustling hard to, you know, make things happen for our families. And I think back to working at Kelly Miller, and like our PTO didn't even exist. And so like what's going on with our families out there? And so when we think about supplemental funding, I think we also need to think about schools that may not have that level of, you know, financial support from parents to be able to get on the ground and help those families that need things like desk and like, you know, supplies in order for them to effectively teach from home.
Thank you so much. We're gonna pause the conversation there. I wanna share some resources that folks have asked for. So first is the PowerPoint slides, the deck that we just shared. The second is going back to these questions. Like I said, there's over 100. It'll probably be 200 by tomorrow, questions that elementary teachers have submitted to us. And that is here. And that document, we are categorizing it so it's easy to look at with most recurring questions and then by category. And then here is a page with all of our teacher created solutions on COVID recovery, which talks about our teacher created plan that happened last spring, which was updated again in the fall, as well as a roadmap that talks about issues like family equity and outdoor learning. And then finally, a letter that if anyone is interested in signing off on, a letter to the mayor and council on funding outdoor learning infrastructure as much as outdoor dining infrastructure. And we'll put that in the chat as well. Really, really appreciate everybody being with us today. You can always trust teachers with a presentation. So really appreciate all of the teachers who contributed to this conversation today and their time in preparation with all of these ideas in the midst of all that they are doing right now. So great appreciation to the teachers and great appreciation to all of you who joined us and listened to us. And please help these teachers. We're going through a very stressful time right now. Advocate and use your voices in whatever position of power you have to make sure that they are heard and that real collaboration happens so that our ideas can really be generated from those who are most affected and are on the front lines. Thank you so much for joining us today.